Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chuck Furuya Uncorked, our new episode featuring my wife, Cheryl.
Hi.
So, not only is Cheryl my wife, my life partner, but she's also my traveling partner when we go in search of wines, when we go to all these far places, walking vineyards, meeting vignerons or winemakers, hanging out, talking story, tasting wines, and we get a feel of the world of wines in a much better perspective that way. And again, the inventor, the creator, the producer, the director of this podcast, Kali.
How's it, you guys?
Yeah, so it's just the three of us tonight. And, we just want to just talk story again, in search of enjoying wine. That's the whole purpose of this thing. It's again, to get some ideas for you that you may not have ever thought of in pursuit of enjoying wine. So Cheryl, let's start off with you and let's talk about what was one of those moments that you first had wine. So when you were growing up in this industry, way back when you were a server, what was your choice of drink?
Not too far back when, by the way.
I think I always drank wine. I mean, one of the first things we drank was Havemeyer Peace Porter, and then we drank Mateus and Lancers and Bartles and James and Strawberry Hill. So
Are those good wines?
no.
Oh,
And
I mean, they're fruity, they're easy to drink.
like White Zinfandel?
Yes, yeah.
And so was that did you also drink beer at the time or
No,
liquor?
not really, no. I didn't like beer. I just thought it was really bitter. And so it was just the sweet things that I was,
And lower in alcohol?
lower in alcohol and
Right.
Enjoyable. So
Okay. And then when was your first aha moment wine?
aha moment.
That you sat there going, "Oh my gosh, this is what wine can be," and it spurred your curiosity. That took a while, huh?
It took a while because that aha moment wine is always the same wine. That it was the one we had in Alsace. So it was that 1997 Oxyduress Costerie. It was so pretty and so delicious, and it was just like every sip was like, wow, this is amazing. Wow.
So that was in the 2000s sometime. So
Yeah.
that it took you that long to have an aha moment. Now,
Yeah.
you never had an aha moment with, for instance, Domaine Tempier?
Oh,
And,
absolutely. I mean,
so that was before that.
yeah, I'm not on a good time frame here. I just know for Bandal, to me, though, that wine was so interesting because when you smelt it, it smelled like barnyard. And you're thinking, oh, great, what is this going to taste like, And then you take a sip of it, and it was just delicious. It was beautiful. It had fruit. It had interestingness. And the barnyard wasn't in the flavor. So that was kind of an aha
So is that
moment.
considered aromatics?
No, Bandol is a red. Typically, it's an appellation in southern France and Provence, down there by the Mediterranean. And they're famous for their red wines, although they do make white and rosé, Bandol Blanc and Bandol Rosé. The one she's talking about is the Rouge from one of the most iconic wine estates in all of France. It's called Domaine Tempier. And so that was an aha moment for her, I recall. She just, when you smell it, you go, oh, I don't know, man. It's pretty funky. She described it as barnyard. But when she tasted it, you could see the sense of wonderment. Just her face lighten up. It was just like this moment. She just sat there going, wow, look how beautiful this wine is. It took me many, many years to understand the wines of Domaine Tempier. So she did it in one try, and she just fell in love with it. There was another wine that you mentioned to me the other night. I kept trying to remember what the wine was, and that was Condrieu, which is a white wine from the northern Rhone Valley of France. It's up there in the northern Rhone. It's a hillside like Côte-Rôtie and Hermitage, but they grow a white grape called Viognier. Viognier is typically very aromatic. It smells like plumeria, honeysuckle, tropical fruits. It's so exotic. It's so luscious. And so the first time, Cheryl, you had Condrieu, what did you think?
I just thought it was beautiful. I mean, just the mouthfeel of it and the flavors that just took over your mouth, like the honeysuckle you were saying. But it was the mouthfeel of it, and it was so pretty. And it still had a great acidity, and it was just really beautiful. I think I've only had that wine a couple of times, but it's amazing wine. I love it.
So I think it's so interesting that the three wines we've discussed so far is a red Bandol from Provence, a white Viognier wine from the northern Rhone Valley, and then you mentioned Costerie Oxy du Rest, which I didn't explain to the viewer. That's a Pinot Noir from the village of Oxy du Rest in Burgundy, France. Costerie is one of the most iconic, hardest to get, most expensive wines out of anywhere in the world. I mean, the Costerie wines are so expensive. So we were there for a 2.5-week trip, I believe it was, through France. And we went to see all these different producers, 2.5 weeks of seeing 3, 4, 5 producers a day, tasting wines with them, walking vineyards, talking story, whatever we did. And of that whole trip, the wine that stuck out in her mind and being her aha moment was that wine that we had before the trip started. We had just arrived in Alsace, France, which is on the border of Germany. And we were at a restaurant in our hotel. And I saw that on the wine list. We ordered it because you can't find. At that time, you couldn't find that wine in the United States too frequently or too often. And so I just wanted to see what it was like and enjoy a nice bottle of wine with Cheryl to toast our trip together.
But now you can find that in the United States?
It's not readily available. And Costerie wines are some of the most expensive in the world.
And your dad doesn't drink much, and he did share that bottle with me, so I know it had to be good. So.
Yeah, it was
really good. It was
pretty.
so pretty.
So that was an aha moment. So what about aha moment with perhaps a California wine? Is there any that really, or something else besides the old world, something new world, Australia, California, Chile, whatever?
There's so many wines that, spark your fancy at one point or another for one reason or another. I think
Fred
in the
Scherer.
beginning, Fred Cherry's wine, Jim Clendenin, the Au Bon Climat wines, always I found so interesting because it was a new world wine with old world characteristics and wine sense, and I think his wines are beautiful.
So okay, and the other thing that's remarkable, she mentioned Scherer. That's out of Sebastopol, California, Russian River. Although some of his vineyards in Alexander Valley. And Au Bon Climat is a very heralded, iconic winery from, it's based out of the Santa Maria Valley of Santa Barbara, California. And he's a legendary winemaker that makes wines more like French than Californian, and more finesse. Same thing with Cheryl. They're more finesse wines, not power, opulent wines. Is that safe to say, Cheryl?
Mm-hmm. Very pretty wines, his wines, all of them, the sharp
Balance, texture.
And they age really well. They're really beautiful.
And that's a big statement because there's a lot of wines that may age, but the question always is how many wines get better with age? And we've been fortunate to have a lot of older renditions of both Au Bon Climat and Scherer that have been mind-blowing.
Not to digress too much, but how do you determine if a wine is going to be able to age? How do you determine something that's meant to drink right now and something that you want to store away for later?
Gosh, that just comes from experience.
But you will taste a wine in its youth and know that this is something that you'd want to put away.
I can, but there was a time when there was all these highly rated red wines from Australia. The magazines were giving it 99 points, 100-point wines and ratings. And I was so disappointed one time when I had one of those wines that was 99-point rated. And it was like the hardest thing to get. And I had it when it was 7 years old, and it was prune juice. So just because a wine is prolific
now
in its youth,
yeah.
That doesn't mean it's going to be age-worthy. It's something with structure and balance and texture and all that stuff. A lot of people will say today that when wines are manipulated by addition of things or whatever, or they're not physiologically mature, they'll fall apart instead of lasting through the aging process. So I don't think there's one answer to it all, but somehow through experience we've been able to, find wines that, man, when you have it 20 years old, 10 years old, oh my goodness, it's something special.
When you open those bottles, even you're surprised. It's like, oh, can you believe how well it's aged? So you never know what's going to come out.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another experience that we can talk on another podcast.
Yeah.
But Cheryl, what about in terms of an aha wine and food moment for you?
That's an easy one because I remember the moment perfectly. It was at Luraku, and we were doing a food tasting for one of the kaiseki dinners there, and we were trying a chawan mushi, which is a Japanese like egg custard, and you had paired a Henri Perricet Macon Village with it, and
Which is a Chardonnay from southern Burgundy, France.
yeah. So I took a bite of this chawan mushi, which was creamy. I think it had some truffle in it too.
Right.
And had butter in it, and it was very rich in your mouth.
There was shrimp.
Yeah, and so then I took a sip of that wine, and it completely cleansed my palate. And I could still taste the beautiful truffle and the richness of the chawan mushi, but it got me ready to have another bite. And it was at that moment I understood what a wine pairing was. You know, the wine made the food taste better, and the food made the wine taste better. You know, over the years we would do wine pairing dinners, and people would call and say, "Hey, what was that wine we had the other night with that dish? And it was so good." And so I'd tell them, and then I'd see them later. They go, "You know, I bought that wine and it wasn't that good." I'd go, "Well, what did you eat it with? I mean, drink it with?" You know, so it really makes a difference. What wine you have with what food, and that's where that wine pairing came in. I think it's just such a special thing that Chuck is really good at. You know, I mean, I've had wine pairing dinners where they're not really wine pairing dinners.
Yeah.
You know, the food doesn't complement
They're
the
okay
wine.
pairings, kind of thing.
And the wine doesn't complement the food. But Chuck's pairings, like the kaiseki dinners that we always did at Hiroshi's, I mean, there was it was a work. You know, it was like the chef made the dish, Chuck chose the wine, and maybe it didn't work, so then the chef tweaked the dish, and, you know, Chuck would make suggestions to add, you know, a dollop of chili oil or a dollop of something. And then all of a sudden this wine and this food just perfectly melded.
Wow.
And his wine pairings are phenomenal. They're so good.
Thank you. You know, just to give that, I don't know if we talked about in previous episodes, but again, you know, that whole concept is, it's not only about power and structure and acid and mojo and prominence, you know, when you do pairings. Sublime and finesse is also something that could work, especially with a chef like Hiroshi. I mean, you know, the foods are more delicate and everything. So you have to go at it with an open mind. And the best way I can describe that to you, and again, this is the part I don't know if it's in a previous podcast, but I look for the tree when I select the wine. So the tree means no branches, no oak, no alcohol, no bitterness, you know, no branches. And if the chef is that good and their food is balanced, in other words, no branches, it's not overly sweet, it's not overly spicy, it's not overly salty, it's not, you know, etc., then those two trees can line up. And then we go in the kitchen. This happened in Montana. When Cheryl and I went to Montana, and there was all these famous chefs, including two that were had won the Top Chef program on TV previously, you know. And, you know, you, in most cases, you can't tell a chef, change your food, you know. But these chefs were willing to collaborate. And it was magic, you know. We just go back and forth. And so one of the dishes was a cider braised pork. You know, so instead of cider is sweet. It's hard to do red wine with sweet dishes. You know, it becomes very tannic, bitter, it becomes very alcoholic. So we added jus to it and braised it. So it was more savory. Same thing with his butternut squash puree. Butternut squash is sweet. You know, what we did instead was we marked it, grilled it, and then he smoked it for 2 hours.
And what does that do to the
It makes it
puree?
more savory. And so it melts in with the wine more than clashing with the wine, you know. And same thing with the Lakehead cherry sauce. Most people, they take the cherries and they squeeze it. It's juice, it's sweet. They reduce it so it's sweetest. You know, red wines don't like that. You know, so what he did instead was we made a savory sauce, and at the last moment we added fresh squeezed cherry juice. So it was more savory. So the point is, you start off here, and then you work together, you collaborate.
To find somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's when the magic really can happen.
And this is how good he is. One day, I went to a girlfriend's house for dinner, and she had a fish dish, and Chuck goes, "That'll be a Riesling." So I took a Riesling, and we were having the fish. Took a sip of the Riesling, and it was like, not quite right. So I called him. I said, "It's not going with it." He goes, "Squeeze lemon on your fish.
And pepper.
And then take a sip of your wine." And it was like, boom, it was magic.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
I mean, it's his ability is amazing. It's
So-
just incredible.
I mean, I don't know if we ever went over this on the past podcast. Either you asked all of the guests on the podcast about aha moments that they had. What was your aha food and wine moment for yourself?
Wow, that's a pretty heavy one. There's been so many.
But like, what was your thing that was like, this is what I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do, and this is what I'm gonna devote my life to, and
Well,
I don't know if we talked about that even on the
no,
first
when I
episode.
was at Halekulani, there were many.
Perfect. You're talking about perfect pairing.
Perfect pairings.
Well, and for the viewer, I would relate the perfect pairing from I don't know if I've ever even had a perfect pairing, but from that movie The Last Samurai, where the emperor king is looking for the perfect cherry blossom, but it's like 1 in 4
no,
million.
exactly.
Like, it's super rare. So the perfect pairing is not a common thing.
It wasn't an emperor, it was a samurai. But
Yeah,
I get your
samurai.
point.
Yeah.
But, because there's certain chefs, they're wine savvy, and they want to make it work. Philippe Padovani was one of those chefs. When he was the executive chef of Halekulani, and he did the foods at La Mer restaurant, we used to have some unreal pairings.
So let's talk about one, for example.
Oh, there was so many, but one was just it was just a seared onaga with a what's called nage or nage. It's a broth. It's made from all kinds of seafoods and all kinds of like celery and all that stuff, and it's just like this sublime, delicate broth with fresh ogo inside. And I did a cassis. Cassis is yes, it's a liqueur, but it's also an appellation down in Provence, France, and they make a very special white wine, and it's called cassis. And it has, because it's right on the ocean, it has a real delicate salinity to it, and that with the ogo and the fish, oh my God, it was magical. That was magical. But I have to say, probably the most striking. There's 2 other pairings that just blew my mind. One of them was with a chef at the Manalani Bay Hotel in Bungalows. We used to do a lot of wine and food events there, and with some of the greatest chefs in the world, right? So one year, Cheryl and I worked with a chef named Mario Batali, and he was Babbo in New York at that time. He's in a little trouble right now, but I mean, he's a great chef. And Mario Batali did hamachi, and he did it like thick, like this, like a steak. And he cooked only one side. He seared only one side. The other side was raw. He served it with arugula with some type of light fruit vinaigrette. And then there was a passion orange, a lilikoi sauce that was very tart, sweet and sour. And fresh cracked pepper, salt. That's it.
Wow.
And I did an older, an aged, yeah, exactly, an aged Riesling from Andre Ostertag in Alsace, France, from a Grand Cru vineyard called Münchberg. Oh my God! Even he wrote about it because it was just this pairing. All of us looked at each other and we're sitting there going, "Oh my goodness! Now this is wine and food, man."
Wow.
It was really good.
Yeah, that was magic. And then the other one, I'm sorry to keep going on,
No.
but the other one that was really magical was at that event we did, Cuisines of the Sun. And, when you have so many star chefs, every year there was up to 15 chefs from all around the world, like I told you, from Bengali, from Jamaica, from all over the place. And one year, there was a star-studded list of chefs, Jeremiah Tower, who's very famous, and the chef from Wolfgang's restaurant, Spago, his name was, I can't remember right now. I'll remember in a minute. But, Lee Hefner, I think. And there was just so many star chefs. And one of the courses was with a 1996 Gundelach Gigi, Große Gewächs. It's Germany's attempt at Grand Cru.
Mm-hmm.
It's this big, just structured, masculine, formidable Riesling, dry, and just so powerful, so mega intense. You sit there going, whoa, how the hell are you going to pair a dish to this wine? That wine would overpower anything. And it was so hard. It was so unyielding, you know. And I just remember having all these discussions with Roy Yamaguchi. And he, you know, I remember on gala night, there's like 75 cooks in the kitchen. You know, because everybody has a course. There's like 10 courses or something. Every chef has a course with their team. And I remember this pairing that Roy did. He took his miso butterfish and did a twist to it. I'll never forget that. And it was just, he made it so that it tastes good with the dish. And I remember walking to the kitchen, because as you remember, I was co-MC of that event. And I remember looking way on the other side of the kitchen, and Roy was leaning against the wall like this. And he just winked at me like, brah, I nailed it, didn't I? You know, and I just sat there going, yep, you did. That was a magical pairing.
With that Grand Cru Riesling.
I wouldn't even know where to begin of pairing a dish, but Roy just winked at me like that, man. It was like this moment that everybody else just went away. I just was, all I could see was Roy, you know. And
that's cool.
That was pretty magical, man. Yeah.
So if you're gonna comment that Auntie Cheryl seems to really like French wines, you really seem to like German Rieslings.
When it comes to food,
is it because we're in the Pacific?
Yes, I think that's a lot to do with it. But you know, like I told you, Riesling is a grape that has rounder acidity than all these other white wine grapes. You know, for whatever reason, because they're harvesting in October, November instead of August to September, so the grapes are hanging on the vines longer. So you get riper, rounder, deeper acidity. That's called tartaric acidity, and it's rounder, and it's not so.
What does rounder acidity mean?
It's round. It's not so severe. It's not so structured like this, where the food really can't match into the nooks and crannies like rounder acidity. You know, the rounder acidity just works its way into the dish. You know, and then Riesling comes in very different styles. So. In those two cases, man, oh my gosh. And because one had miso and the other dish I mentioned had passion lilikoi, you know, it made sense Riesling all the way. But I'm not limited to Riesling only. I think, you know, on one of the podcasts we did Lambrusco.
Yeah.
And you have Lambrusco by itself and it tastes really great. You know, it's refreshing, it's cold, and you have it with salumi, as Cheryl noted, and it was really good. But then with the cheese.
Salumi is salami, plural.
Yeah, and so salami. So it was really good, but it didn't necessarily go with the cheese. But what happened when we put ice cubes inside it? You know, so like what Mark said the other night, you know, Mark Shishido, it's that you take a bigger gulp, a smaller gulp, you know, it can influence
bigger
the pairing.
bite, smaller bite. Yeah.
It can influence the pairing. Well, sometimes you just add ice cube, make it colder or warmer, or, you know, there's a lot of times that I'll, like a red wine, I'll chill it down more to make sure it goes with the dish.
I think the bottom line is that it's like, you know, we're talking about there's food aha moments, there's wine aha moments, but when you have an aha moment of the combination of the two, that will sell almost anybody on that this stuff's pretty cool, you know.
So is there other aha moments for you on wine and food pairings that you've had?
I mean, just here at home when we were doing the lamb meatballs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I made some Greek lamb meatballs and
with that thick what is this?
Tzatziki, yeah.
That thing was good.
Yeah, and I mean, you figure a lamb meatball would be great with a nice Greek red wine, maybe. And we were eating it, and it was like, no. So Chuck goes, open the white. It was Zoe, the Moscofilero and Roditis. He goes, try that with it, and it was terrific. I mean, it just, you know, it didn't clash because the red wine was clashing with that meatball dish, and when you had it with the white wine, it was a perfect wine pairing, and he's very proud of himself from that. But it was great. I mean, who would have thought that? You know, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, and I saw that wine. I saw that wine on sale at 2 stores when I was going around looking for the wines, and it was $13.99.
So, what made you go to a white wine? What was it in those meatballs or with the tzatziki or whatever that made you know that it would be a white wine that went with that dish?
Is that not a common?
No, most people would do rosé or probably red wine with
Yeah.
lamb specifically, because lamb is fatty. So the best way I can explain to you that concept. So Cheryl, souvlaki in Greece. What is the components of souvlaki?
Oregano, lemon, and
Exactly.
olive oil.
Lemon. So
I get
exactly.
it. I get it. Okay.
So when you have the souvlaki is on skewers, and it's just salt and pepper. Whether it's pork, chicken, lamb, fish, whatever, it's just on skewers, and they put salt and pepper on top. And as they're grilling it like this, then they'll add squeeze of lemon on top, and then they'll add some dried herbs, specifically oregano. That's it. And you eat it. Oh my goodness, man. When you have good souvlaki from Greece, and we had one at this farmer's market on Crete, there was a line of people. All the other ones never have line. All this guy did was salt, pepper, dried oregano, and fresh lemon juice. That's it.
So-
And her meatballs reminded you of
That
I-
it-
that?
I just thought with the tzatziki,
Tzatziki.
on it. I just thought it called for something light and lemony and aromatic, because you have the herbs inside, it just brings it out, man. It connects with the herbs, and the lemony edge connects with the, it just makes it refreshing. It just refreshes your palate between bites.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I think when you said that was an aha moment for me, just because when you said the lemon. So could you, if you think you can squeeze a lemon on a dish, would that constitute having a white wine with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
A wine with lemony edge. But
Yeah.
the one factor you have to be careful about is that there's no one answer for everything, right? But one thing you have to be careful about is bitterness. So a lot of white wines have bitterness today and high alcohol. And that's what you have to be careful about. The lemoniness is just one component.
One branch.
So, yeah, one branch, yes. So the Skouras Zoe, it's a white wine. It's a country white wine from Greece. It really isn't bitter, and it's just light, effortlessly light on the palate, wonderfully perfumed. So it will go with fresh herbs. It's got that lemony edge, so it's going to go with where you would use a squeeze of lemon, as she put it, and it doesn't have bitterness or alcohol. So it's not going to interfere. It's not going to clash. That's why that wine is so good. It's not a trophy wine.
No.
It's not one that you put in a cellar for 10, 20, 30 years from now. But it's the kind of wine that you would have at a dinner table, right? We've experienced that over and over again.
Yeah.
Cheryl and I, when we travel, there's the winemakers that we just sit there going, oh my gosh, this is a guy. And then there's all these trophy wines and whatnot, right? That really, that's how they win their acclaim. That's how they win their prominence in the wine world, But it's oftentimes they're lesser wines that we try to bring here for vino, because it's neighborhood,
Cost effective.
Yeah, but it's also neighborhood. It's casual. It's you gulp it, with the food. You enjoy it together. And the Skouras is an example of that.
So as far as, because we're videotaping for viewers, we'll do a link, or not a link, but we'll, in the description of each video, we'll write out the wines that we're talking about, just in case people want to go and try them for themselves.
So Cheryl, while we're on that subject, whether it's Greece or Bandol, we had dinner with a lunch with Lulu Perrault on her terrace, where they don't almost stove, they just have a spit.
Who's Lulu Perrault?
She's the owner of Domaine Tempier in Bandol. So Provence is, meadows and
Real country.
lifestyle, yeah. And so it used to be. It's not so country so much. I mean, civilization is encroaching for sure. But, she wrote the book on the wines and foods of Provence. It's called Lulu's Provincial Table. And so you go there, there's a spit. And the meat was on a wooden stick. And they were just rotating. And their son-in-law had a big branch of rosemary and was going like this in their own olive oil that they make and just basting.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's how she cooks, I mean, it's just like that. And that's how their wines are. That's why it goes with so many different dishes. She's famous for her bouillabaisse. I mean, in the world, her bouillabaisse is like, it's legendary. It's like the standout. So we've had that opportunity for those kind of situations. What are some other opportunities of winery visits or vineyard visits that really stood out in your mind?
Well, we've had so many. I mean, when we travel to wine country, it's not about visiting the wineries. It's about visiting the vineyards. And we climb hillsides and I have a funny story about Chuck because one time we were climbing up one of the steep vineyards, and I would turn around and he'd be stopped at a vineyard, at a vine, like tasting a grape, and we're all trekking up the hill, and he's down he said he was tasting grapes. Well, he admitted later that he just needed to rest. So,
These hillsides,
Yeah.
where we go. But there I was. It was this really steep vineyard, and I didn't want to act like, whatever. I was the caboose. So I was just pretending I was tasting grapes. Because, Cheryl, this Wilhelmina rye, she hikes up there every morning, all the way to the top, right? So 7 days a week. So she's used to climbing up these inclines. Not me.
yeah, but you love those vineyards. Those are
Yes.
the vineyards you love. And on our last trip when we were in Dolce Acqua, just looking at those vineyards, and you talk to the people that are farming it, and they don't have water. If it needs water, they have to carry it up there.
You have to truck it up.
I mean, it's like looking at like Makapu. I mean, can you imagine carrying up water, just to water your vines? But I mean,
Oh, they have no irrigation system, nothing.
no,
Nothing.
No, and when there's just so many places like that we've gone together. Cold tea. I mean,
If I can just say this, though, about Dolce Acqua. So one of the heartbreaking stories we heard on this last trip was, if you look at all the vineyards, they're like, I would say 75% fallow, 65% fallow. All the other people gave up. So not only are these vineyards steep like this and have to be terraced, and you have to bring everything you need up, and the roads are narrow. And can you imagine taking a truck up there and picking the grapes and then having to drive down? So the challenges are seemingly insurmountable. I mean, it's just crazy, right? Well, now, whether it's a side effect of the warming of the planet or whatever, now all the wild animals are devouring their grapes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they lose a minimum 50% of the grapes.
Whoa.
And some of the vineyards are 100%. So everybody's given up.
Wow.
And this is all up and down Italy. It's not just limited to Dolce Acqua. But Dolce Acqua it's exaggerated because it's so steep and terraced. I remember.
So the work is already a lot, and now they're losing
yeah.
50% of yield.
At least.
When you hear a lot of the younger generation they don't want to work that hard, so they're giving up these vineyards and stuff. It's not being passed on
Right.
a lot of the time.
It's really unfortunate.
Mm.
I mean, some of the vineyards are so steep. I remember asking him, I was like, if you fall, you die. You know what I mean? It's so steep, and you just...
And you wouldn't stop rolling or...
No. I mean, in Germany, we were in, which vineyard was it?
Peace Porter, Goldschupchen,
Yeah, and you look down, I mean, when you look...
Erzegger Wirtsgarten.
It was like this, and you look down, and the cars were like this big. I mean, we were so high up, and I mean, it just, you wonder how they harvest, it's just amazing. In fact, one guy told us that they don't tell the people that are harvesting what vineyard that they're picking, because some of the vineyards are so steep they won't show up. So
The workers won't show up.
they don't tell them which one they're gonna harvest until they get there.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And you know what's another story too, is she mentioned one of her aha moment wines was Condrieu, right? So Condrieu is steep like Wilhelmina rye, and it has to be terraced, so it's pretty steep, And I don't know if you remember, but when we were looking at it from the road and you looked up, you see all these dots
Yeah.
on the hillside, right?
Yeah. It was people harvesting.
They harvest.
Yeah.
What does the steepness do to
Gives
the
like-
wine? Like, why is that?
There's no one answer to that. But one of the things is, you want to stress the vines, and a lot of people believe. And when you stress the vine to the point where it thinks it has a chance to die or something, it's going to focus all its energy on its offspring, hence the grapes, And then another thing, you delay the sugar ripeness by having shallow topsoils and steep vineyards and wind pounding the vineyards, and the difference in temperature between down here on top of the hill over here is 5 degrees, 8 degrees. All these factors slows down the sugar ripeness.
Which is physiological maturity.
So the grapes hang on the vines longer, so you have more and more physiological maturity. So there's many answers to this. There's no one thing, but you have to understand, the vineyards of Condrieu and Côte-Rôtie over there in the northern Rhone, a lot of those vineyards were planted by the Romans. So this is something that's been
generation, like thousand years.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Chave Hermitage, who Cheryl and I went to see with Uncle Nuncio and Auntie Joanne. Their vineyard was planted. Well, this family has owned and operated their vineyard for over 500 years.
Oh.
So when you look back, it was before Christopher Columbus.
It's like 16 generations.
The same family.
Yeah, and these vineyards are so steep that's another one of those vineyards I had to stop and eat grapes. Cheryl made me walk to the top, man. I mean, it's like, oh my.
Oh, he walked up to La Chapelle.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
on Hermitage.
Yeah.
So maybe before we taste wine and stuff, could we talk about service a little bit, industry? Because you always comment on Auntie Cheryl's ability to, like a Mark Shishido.
Yes.
Okay, so I was a server for 35 years. And I started learning about wine, I guess, when I started at Hoku's. And it was the training that we were getting from Chuck, you know, and it kind of inspired me. And, you know, being a server, you're creating experiences for people. And you need product knowledge, you need knowledge to create experiences for people. So that's where the wine came in. I started to learn about wine. It helped me more in my profession. You know what I mean? I could recommend a wine, I could create that experience, and it just kind of flowered from there because I enjoyed the wine, learning about it. And so traveling with Chuck gave me a whole new perspective on gave me stories to tell people.
Deeper perspective.
Yeah, and it gave me stories to tell people, which just makes that experience more special, and it's personal. So he's taught me everything I know about wine. So, you know, but I think I always love.
I don't know
creating.
if that's true, but some.
No, you have. I mean, it's just you need that knowledge, and
So for people that are listening, if they are in the career of hospitality, you would encourage to spend the time to learn not only about beer or spirits, but also your wine lists, or to
absolutely. And your food. It's just that product knowledge and the stories behind.
to be a professional.
To be a professional, exactly.
But what we were talking about, Mark Shishido, was about service is more about hospitality. It wasn't only information. So I think he wants to know your view on hospitality.
Hospitality. It's how you make people feel, right? So it's from the minute they walk in the door, they should feel welcome in your place and that you're going to take care of them.
Like you're welcoming into your home.
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, and you are. I mean, it's like I was a manager for a while, and you look at tables and you can kind of tell just by their body language or their facial expression or how they're moving the food around their plate. But your whole goal in the restaurant is to make sure that person leaves happy and satisfied.
And would come back again.
And will come back again. And so you watch people and you make sure that if something's not right or you go over and you go, how's your meal? You know, or, you know, are you enjoying that? And you can see them moving it around and go, oh, it's okay. I hate that word, you know, because if it's okay, it's not what we want to do in our restaurant. So you make the extra effort to take it away, get them what they want. It's just making sure that when they walk out that door, they went, wow, you know.
What an experience.
Yeah.
I got exactly what I wanted tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, if you are paying that much attention to them, it adds to the experience as well, you know. So.
That's your contribution to their dining experience is what you do, right?
Yes.
It's not just the food. It's not just the wine anymore.
No.
You contribute by the service. And I was explaining this to Cully the other night. When a customer takes their first bite of food, can you immediately tell if they like the food or not?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they cut their steak, can you immediately tell if it's on their face, if it's done to specifications or not?
Right.
So that's the time to correct it. So it's these little insights like this that clues you, rather than just taking an order and just timing it and bussing it. That's one level of service, but hospitality, that's why I didn't ask her to talk about service. I'm talking about hospitality, you know, and that just comes from observing a customer, just like you would your grandmother. You know, when you're a host, you get reservations. What time? What's your last name? Okay, that's one way to do it. It's very efficient. But how is it different when your grandmother walks in the door? Your eyes light up. You want to hug her, right? It's that kind of connection, you know, that kind of welcomingness, that kind of hospitality. And then on the technicalities, it's attention to detail of making sure they're really enjoying the food, because everybody's going to say they like it, you know. But the problem is if you don't
can tell if they're bullshitting or not.
If you don't, let me put it this way. If you don't hit 100% guest satisfaction, there's a chance those people are not coming back, right? So if you are locally driven restaurant, in other words, almost all your clientele is local, right? Local people from Hawaii.
Or from anywhere in your wherever community
if you're not 100%, right, that means your clientele is shrinking because there's only a finite amount of people on Oahu. So that's why this whole service thing is self-serving for the restaurant, is that, you know, you have to care. You know, you have to.
That is the word. It's caring. It's like
genuinely right?
caring. Like if they have children, making sure, you know, would you like me to bring out their food first? You know, taking care of their kids. That's a big plus. You know what I mean? Just taking care of grandma. You know, if you know, there was one story. I mean, I had a gentleman who didn't have an arm, and so I just asked, would you like us to cut your steak? You know, and then we cut his steak for him so he didn't have to do it in bite-sized pieces. And then when he asked for sugar with his coffee, you know, I opened the packet so that he, you know what I mean? It was just noticing things like that, you know, I mean, you do it from your heart. You're not doing it to impress anybody,
or
but
to
it's
belittle
just,
or
no, you're just
well, that's
trying
what
to
you would do for your grandmother.
Yeah, you're just trying to take care of that person, you know, and it's just noticing things like that.
Well, and Dad told me the other night, you know, if a guest has to ask you for something,
right,
then you're not noticing and
right,
you're not doing your job, right? Like you always have to be that one step ahead.
Yeah.
I look at it like, you know, I've told this story many times before, but an example of service excellence is the caddy of a golf
caddy.
player. Yeah. So imagine you're the caddy for Tiger Woods, right? He shouldn't have to ask you for a ball. You know whether to walk 10 feet behind, 25 feet behind, wipe the ball, not wipe the ball, offer a club recommendation, you know, handle the crowd. So all Tiger has to do is focus on swinging that club with tempo and making perfect contact with that ball. That's what a caddy should do, right? So it's the same thing with a butler. The butler doesn't tell the customer, oh, no, I don't walk the dog at 11 o'clock in the morning. And you know what? If you want coffee, you come down at 9 o'clock, otherwise you ain't getting any. That's what, these are examples of service from a different perspective. And I also just want to remind everybody that whole image of a grandmother and your grandmother walking in the door and your face is different and you're gonna you know, tear apart her sugar packets for her and all that stuff. This is all. And it's got to be genuine. Otherwise, you know, how is that hospitality? You know, so that's examples of that.
I have a funny story.
Okay.
I had a server. I was watching a table that he was taking care of,
and you were a manager? Or?
Yeah, and I could tell that it wasn't going well, so I stepped in and I started taking over and making sure that I was there and that they had everything they needed. And at the end of the night, I asked that server, I said, "What do you do when you think a customer is mad at you?" He goes, "Oh, I don't go back." Right. And that explained it to me, you know, and I was like, oh my God, no. I said, no, what you need to do is kill them with kindness. You are in their face more. you, you know, so I mean, it's just paying attention to that. I mean, for people in the service industry, if, you know, that's just it. You have to be there regardless of how that person is feeling, because you have the opportunity to turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
So you do go back. Yes.
And more often they're mad because you made a mistake, right?
Yes.
So you have to fix that
Yes.
mistake.
Yeah. So
That's
a
good.
funny one. So Cheryl, now you have any more questions about hospitality service?
Nope.
So going back to wines, I was thinking, who are some of those wine personalities or people or vignerons? Kelly, do you know what a vigneron
No,
is?
I was just about to ask that.
So vigneron, if you look it up, it's a French word. If you look it up in a French dictionary, it says winemaker, wine grower, something along those lines. But to me, vigneron means more. So in Corsica, for instance, the easiest way I can explain to you what that means to them there, when they call someone a vigneron, it's like a samurai. It's not only about sword skills. It's something about ethic and code and, you know, other things that have nothing to do with sword skills. Vigneron, you live it, you don't talk about it. So my question, Cheryl, to you is, who was some of the most spellbinding or, you know, interesting vignerons that you have witnessed or been in presence of, like whether it's Greece, art space, or you know, there's so many places where we've been that
I think Abatucci stands out in my head. I know when we were going there, I think he said he only had 20 minutes to see you, but
his wife said that to you.
yeah, and you know when you
That's Corsica, Cully, by the way.
Okay.
But John Charles Abatucci is one of the greatest vignerons of the island of Corsica.
yeah, and I mean, Chuck, when he travels, I mean, and visits these wineries and visits the vignerons, he has questions for them, like, I mean, about everything, and they sense his passion for wine. And so they may say, I only have 20 minutes, and he ended up spending like 4 or 5 hours with us. Because
At
Yeah.
Harvest.
No, go.
At Harvest.
At Harvest, yeah. I mean, it was just Chuck's passion for wine
Yeah.
is contagious. I mean, one time we went to, I'm changing the subject here a little bit, but Abatucci was amazing. And you can add to that. But when we were in Italy, when you go to visit some of the wineries, it's their home, you know. And so you go, hi, can we come visit? And they'll go, yes, we'll meet you downstairs. And we went to Moncagata, I believe it was, and he spoke no English.
in Barbaresco, Piemonte. It's a very famous Barbaresco producer.
Yeah, and he spoke no English, and Chuck doesn't speak Italian, but Chuck was asking him questions, and he was getting the answer. I mean, he was getting the answers, even though they weren't speaking the language to each other. The world of wine is kind of universal because they both understood what each other was saying, even if it wasn't in their language. It was amazing to watch. And then he invited him down to the cellar, you know, which was really special. But there were.
At Harvest.
And yeah, and you see other moments like that when we saw Mascarello.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that. That was a moment.
Italy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the town of Barolo, so there's an appellation called Barolo, and there's all these different towns that are famous for Barolo and approved for Barolo. La Mora, Castiglione Falletto, you know, there's these towns. And there's also happens to be a town called Barolo, and there's only a few producers that are actually located in the town of Barolo. And one of the all-time greatest winemakers, I mean, like legendary, like most revered, was a guy named Bartolo Mascarello, right? And he's located in the town of Barolo.
So anyway, we had gone there earlier and knocked on the door, and I guess the daughter came to the door and said, "Oh, come back later. We have some people here." And so we came back later, and there was a group of people from Fontarutoli there. They were all Italians, and they were in there talking to him, and she invited us in to listen to them.
So Fontarutoli is a producer from Tuscany, a very famous Chianti producer and red wine producer. I mean, of the highest level from Tuscany. So they drove up from Tuscany to have an audience with Bartolo. Sorry to keep
Yeah.
interrupting, but I want to make sure they are able to follow.
Yeah, and, I'll backtrack a little bit because we did go in and talk to the daughter,
And taste wine.
And taste wine. And you asked her so many questions. She goes, would you, her father was in the other room. She goes, would you like to join them in the other room? Because she goes, yeah, he knows what he's doing. So we walked in there, and they're all sitting around. He's in a wheelchair, and they're all sitting around, and it was like watching like The Godfather. You could see the respect on all of their eyes, and they're all looking, and they're all asking
can hear
questions.
a pin drop.
And he, every word he said, it was just amazing. And there was a gentleman behind, and he looked at us as we were standing there, and he said, do you speak Italian? And we're like, no. But I mean, just to be in his presence. And so they kind of started to translate a little bit for us. But just to be invited into that room with him was a testament to Chuck. They always
memorable.
They always sense his passion.
Yeah.
They always sense it. I mean, everywhere we go, it's always, they understand. Agios was another one in Greece. It was a place called Art Space, and we went there, and it was a man maybe in his 70s, 80s or so.
Grouchy.
Yeah, and it was a winery that was also an art gallery. But
That's cool.
Chuck started asking him questions.
He spoke no English.
He spoke no English, but they were doing that same thing they did with Mocha Gata, and and he started bringing out information for him and opening up special wines. And there was a young lady there that spoke some English, and
She came later, though.
And she looked at Chuck, and she was listening to him ask the questions, and she goes, "You're a real sommelier, yeah?" And we laughed and went, "Why?" She goes, I can tell it's the questions you're asking. You go, a lot of people come here and say they're sommeliers, but you're a real sommelier.
Wow.
And Agios spent so much time with him and sent him home with some special wines. And they still Facebook each other to this day.
He spoke no English, Kelly.
Yeah.
And it was just this remarkable connection. We were there for 5 hours, 6 hours, I can't remember, but it was just a connection. And I have to show you this picture really quickly. So Bryn and her family, Bryn from Senia restaurant. So she happened to go to Greece and visit these people, right? And serendipitously. Okay, so that's Antonis Argios. That's him. Okay, so you can see he's a 70, 80-year-old man. Now look at the book in the bottom left-hand corner, and look whose picture is in there. She took this picture now, not me.
Bryn took this picture in Greece.
Yes, and Santorini.
Yeah.
And she happened to get an audience with him serendipitously because he's not famous. But look at the book in there.
It's you.
He's showing her a picture of Chuck.
It's wild, man. We were sitting right in front of Vino outside on the road, and smoking a cigar and talking story. Dave Newman from Pint and Jigger, Chris Rommel, and Bryn, and she showed us this picture, and I was like, "What the hell is this?"
See, you had that impact on him. He sensed your passion
That was
again.
that was one of the most incredible aha moments for me, because he and I connected. It wasn't about language. It was, I don't know. It was something.
Wine.
It was just something really. That was spectacular. Yeah, and that person, that translator, said he doesn't do Facebook, he doesn't do social media.
But he signed up to keep in touch with you?
Yeah, by the time we got back to the hotel, 20 minutes, he was already sending me notes. It was crazy. It was a crazy experience.
Yeah.
So that was something truly magical. And how about for you, Kali? Have you had the chance to meet anybody like that?
I mean, I'm on probably in my earlier years, but not on the level where I would talk about having, those kind of interactions yet. Hopefully, maybe eventually, but should we taste wine now?
Yes. So on one of the visits, we were at a SOM camp in Paso Robles, California. Paso Robles is roughly halfway between San Francisco and LA. And there was all these sommeliers from around the world. There was a couple from abroad, and most of them were from different parts of the United States. And there was 4 from Hawaii. And we had 1 day extra before we drove from Paso Robles down to LA to catch the planes. So Cheryl and I took the 4 sommeliers and some other people with us down to Santa Barbara, which is south of Paso Robles, just to see some vineyards. I wanted to show these kids because most of them hadn't been to California wine country like this, especially in the Central Coast. So I wanted to show them specifically 3 or 4 vineyards that I thought were game changing. So
And what that area could produce, kind of thing.
yes. So we were in one of the vineyards with one of the very top winemakers out of California, and he served us this bottle. This is called the Hilt, and this is simply called pet-nat. If you notice, it's like a beer bottle cap. So you just take your wine key and just open it up like you would a beer.
Oh.
Cheryl. Cheryl, tip your glass.
Why did that happen?
I don't know.
Maybe
it's
it's
too
spitting
warm.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can wipe it up later.
Yeah.
I'll take a little bit.
Whoa.
Okay, so let me explain this pet-nat to you. Okay. So pet-nat is abbreviation for pétillant natural. It's a way of making sparkling wine, and some of the people in the old days would refer to it as a method ancestral, which means it's a long time winemaking technique. One of the byproducts when you ferment wine is carbon dioxide. So what they essentially do here is they just trap the carbon dioxide as it's fermenting. That's why it's fizzy like this. It's not fully sparkling like champagne. It's just fizzy. And you can see it's not filtered. It's not fined. It's just something that 2 weeks after the wine's fermenting, it's capped and it's ready to go. So it's just a style of wine that a lot of people are gravitating to because it has fizz and it's totally refreshing. It's totally enjoyable.
So when you talk about mouthfeel, is fizziness a part of mouthfeel?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Cheryl.
No, I mean, it's refreshing. I think the bubbles kind of, it uplifts in your mouth. And this has a real lemony edge
It
to
is. It's very tangy.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a lemon soda. It's like right? Like a sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon in it, you know.
What would you pair this with?
What would you imagine? First of all, when would you drink this wine, Cheryl?
I would drink it. I mean, I think it's a daytime wine.
When it's
for
hot
me,
outside.
when it's hot outside and you want something light and not too serious. You know, I think it's like when you want a soda or something, you know, it's just very refreshing. I'd have it anytime.
Like you said, when you want a soda,
Yeah.
Would you drink this over the rocks?
I could, yeah. I could, totally.
So this vineyard is very sparse. It's very semi-arid. It's out there by the ocean. It's continually pounded by this cold ocean air. There's poison. I don't know if it's poison oak or poison ivy all around the place. We have to be careful because of the spores that were flown on because of the strong winds. It's a very naked, semi-barren area. And if you look at the soils, I have it downstairs. I'll show it to you later. But it's like marine influenced soils. And there's one that Cheryl found that has the fish fossil inside. And so it's one part on the ocean. So it's not brown fertile soil. That's why this wine has minerality. That's why it's so light. That's why it has salinity, because of the ocean air and the marine soils. That's what makes this wine so refreshing.
So this would be that squeezing a lemon over your dish kind of wine.
Absolutely.
So fish.
So yes,
Isn't this Pinot Noir?
that's the point.
It's a red wine.
This is 100%
Yeah.
no.
I mean,
This
but
No.
it's a red grape.
red grape,
Yeah.
and it's just 100% Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir, when you squeeze the juice is kind of clear.
Yeah.
It's got a copper color to it, but it's kind of clear, right? So this is just 100% Pinot Noir with no skin contact. So
Wow.
the color's not leached out, and it doesn't capture. When you smell it, it doesn't smell like Pinot Noir. What it smells of is the soil and the salinity of the ocean nearby. You know, that's what this wine smells. So that's why it adds to the complete refreshingness of this thing.
And what would you eat with that then? With this wine?
For me, I would just like to drink it. You know,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
but you can do it with shellfish, scallops, shrimp because of the salinity. You could do it.
But this is more
fish.
of enjoying just the wine itself.
I just wanted to. This is one of the trips that Cheryl and I were on, and this is a wine that we worked hard to get here to Hawaii. Only 7 cases came here to Hawaii. I'm not trying to show you wines that are obscure or hard to get, but all the boys on the trip and girls on the trip, Justin from Lucky Belly and Livestock Tavern got a case. Micah at Royal Hawaiian got a case. Michael Winterbaum at Senia Restaurant got a case. Who else was with us? There was a couple more people. I'm sorry. Ivy from Sanse Waikiki got a case. What do you call? Anyway, you get the idea. So, because there was only like 100 cases or 125 cases made, but I just wanted people to see something of another alternative in terms of enjoying wine.
I mean, he opened this. Was it in the Radiant Vineyard we were in?
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the vineyard. It was hot, and we're in the middle of it, and we're looking for the fossils in the soils. And he opened this right in the middle of the vineyard, and in that hot sun, and it would just kind of hit the spot. He just pulled it out of his trunk, and it was amazing.
Yeah, this vineyard is surrounded by just an absolutely wild countryside, sun-baked. It has a marine-influenced soils. That's what this wine is about. It's not about, it's wild yeast fermented. You can see it's not filled. It's not processed, essentially. It just underwent fermentation. It was capped, and here we go. So, it's just something that's refreshing. And I saw it at a store the other day when I was looking for those German Rieslings that we did the other day. Oh, the dogs.
I mean, not interrupt, but Ravino is so cute right now.
He's been crying to go outside.
So we're going to continue with the sparkling wine theme.
Mm-hmm. Are we doing sparkling wine tonight because you love sparkling wine?
I do love sparkling wine. I mean, I think, it's kind of a brunchy thing. It's like what we do.
Like you said,
with
when you're hot.
When you're hot and when you're with a bunch of your friends and it's not serious. It's something that you can enjoy.
That is so interesting. It's like almost like a lemon warhead.
What's a warhead?
That sour candy.
Oh, okay.
like,
okay.
or not, maybe not as sour, but that.
But what you notice is that is your mouth still salivating?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you salivate. It's kind of a good thing to have before a meal starts because it kind of wets your palate and gets your
digestive juices going.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
Aperitif should be something that gets your mouth ready. Like when you suck on a lemon, you want to eat something. That's what this thing, it stimulates your appetite.
I think that's what the Aperole Spritzes do. When we were in, I guess Italy or even France, I'd walk around and you'd see these little cafes and people all had this orange drink. And I was like, what is that? And somebody said, oh, it's an Aperole Spritz. And so I had one when we were in, it was in France, I think, actually. And it's just Prosecco with a little bit of Aperol, a slice of orange, and a little bit of club soda.
Well, let's taste the Prosecco first, and then we'll do the Aperol Spritz.
Okay, shall I mix it or just taste this first?
No, we'll taste this first.
Okay, can I just...
Okay, so Kelly, this is Italian Prosecco.
So this is another Prosecco that we do have at Buzz's.
Oh, good.
Which is why, before the show, I was trying to ask you that you guys think Flor is a good Prosecco.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, your dad tries to find Proseccos that are not bitter. He's found a few over the years that we've really enjoyed, like the Ruggeri and the Somariva and now this Flor.
Right. And you said that are fun, right?
Yeah,
not too serious.
No, they're easy to drink, but they're not bitter. They're still refreshing. And, there's a lot of Proseccos out there that are pretty bitter, and it doesn't have the same effect. But you go ahead.
So let me just tell you. So Italian Prosecco is one of the top wine imports into the United States now. It's a hot category. That's why you see it at all the big stores. I'm not going to mention any brand names, and et cetera. Well, because it's one of the top wine imports, there's a lot of crap coming in, a lot of mediocre stuff. So that's fine, but you asked me before this podcast, what is Italian Prosecco? So if it tastes like champagne, then it's not Italian Prosecco. Italian Prosecco to me is light and fleeting and flirtatious and stimulating. It's not fully sparkling. Some Prosecco producers are trying to make it via the champagne method. That's not Prosecco. Prosecco is only used typically 2/3 the sparkle, so it's more flirty. It's more, refreshing. And again, you taste this Prosecco, it makes you want to eat. It stimulates the palate. That's Italian Prosecco.
It's so hard for, as a bartender, it's really hard to do Proseccos by the glass because you have to open the bottle and get rid of it. So like for us, we have to use those 6-ounce splits.
Oh, wow.
To what?
But, like at Vino, we sell so much Prosecco and we use that cover I gave you.
Yeah.
That's the key. and keep it well
And
chilled.
it'll
Prosecco
last?
lasts.
Really?
Look,
Yeah.
she opened this the other day,
Yeah, 2 days ago.
2 days
And I'll
ago.
gas it like how I do the red wines?
No. No need, because already it's giving off CO2. But you got to have a good stopper.
Yeah.
Keep it well chilled. She opened this 2 days ago, Cully. It's that stopper I gave you.
I think sparkling wine is
I
a
really-
must-have in any bar.
Well, we
restaurant.
have Prosecco, but we have the little 6-ounce splits. That's like your own little individual glass, but in a bottle, ready to
Yeah.
pour. You know.
But you won't get this quality in this.
But I have this by the bottle, but I don't have it by the glass. So maybe that is a transition there.
I don't know. But, okay, so this is what Italian Prosecco tastes like. Okay, so now I asked Cheryl to make a transition to make something that's more perhaps enjoyable and interesting and different for those of you looking for something to drink. She did a little bit of spiel about Aperole Spritz.
This is like the in vogue cocktail for women in the day.
Is it?
Oh my god, bro! I pour so many Aperole Spritzes.
And
Yeah.
you use the small bottles?
I do.
Oh, what a waste.
Well, when I came back and I made one of these for Melissa, and she was like,
Melissa's your daughter.
yes.
Just for the.
Oh,
yeah.
yes, my daughter, yes. And she was like, oh my God, this is so good. And she took a bottle and went to a brunch with her friends and she made it for them. And so they were all mimosa drinkers. That's all they drank was mimosas every time they got together. Now it's really funny because whenever I go over there and they're all there, this is all they're drinking.
Mimosas are looked at being basic now.
Well,
almost.
this is just so much better.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Why is it better, do you think?
it's not as, the orange juice,
Why don't you make one while you tell us what it
Okay,
is?
well, I gotta get some ice.
I'll get the ice. What do you need?
Just some ice in here.
Okay.
Just in there. But Aperol it's like it's an aperitivo. So I think
Almost
it
like Campari-esque.
yeah. So I think it whets your appetite way more than I think orange juice kind of fills you up a little bit. It's the high acid and
Especially if you're using like not so good orange juice,
yes,
right?
yeah. So anyway. And it's really pretty in the glass, and everybody just kind of loves to have it. But it's true, you do see you sell a lot of them in the
To
restaurant.
me, this put mimosas out of business.
Uh-huh. That's what. Do you use this bottle?
I don't. I use the little. I'm not gonna say the brand name, but I use the.
You use.
I didn't know that Flor was a decent prosecco. So this is another aha moment for me.
So, can I tell you how we got Flor Hawaii? I told you we did those promotions with the chef, Mario Batali, and he was part of the Bastianich restaurant group. So they have they have like 19 of the top restaurants in New York, and they have a couple in LA, and they opened Italy in New York.
I love that place.
Okay, well, this is the guy. That's how I got this wine.
What do you mean?
This is their wine.
This is Mario Batali's wine.
Mario Batali and Joe Bastianich. I don't think they're partners anymore because there was some type of
What, Flor?
split. Yeah,
Ah.
that's
So good.
That's how I got this wine.
It's just a little bit more complex than a mimosa. I will say I do drink manmosas, so I'm wondering if Aperol will pair with Coors Light, like how orange juice pairs with Coors Light.
There's a little bitterness, I think, to Aperol.
Yeah.
And that's what stimulates the appetite. Though.
Yeah, and it is actually an aperitivo. So
Well, and like you talked about when you first started drinking wine, you would drink sweeter things.
right.
But I think after a while, as your palate starts to mature, you look for bitterness or not sweet
Well,
or
yeah, I think that I was telling Chuck the progression of wine is starting out with the sweet stuff, and then you move into white wine, and then maybe you try a lighter red, and then you get into the heavier kind of ripe red wines.
then
and-
you move into the funk.
And then you move into the terroir driven red wines, and once you do that, you can't go back. No, it's
So as far as your recipe for this, what is your ideal Aperol Spritz?
I kind of eyeball it, but it's like maybe, I don't know, 4 ounces of Prosecco and a half an ounce of Aperol and a splash of club soda. And you always have to have an orange in it. A
And
slice of orange.
Yeah.
I like it in a big glass. It's just
Yeah.
more fun. Sometimes you get them in restaurants and they're served in something like this, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same effect as Yes, it's just more fun. But it's a great thing to have, at brunches with your friends. So it's a great starter cocktail. I had it a lot whenever we were in Italy. I think I always had an Aperole Spritz to start.
And where they really specialize is in
And plus,
Venice.
it's wine based. You know what I mean? So you're still, if you want to move into wine, you're still enjoying a cocktail like drink that's wine based. So
That's good. That's the dog. That's bridging the gap, though, and I think that's where wine is becoming really cool, is that you see more and more wine cocktails or wine-driven cocktails, and like you said, it's bridging the gap of liquor, beer, wine. It's that
So again,
bridge.
it's in pursuit of how can we find ways or encourage people to enjoy wine. So this is just another way. It's different from mimosa. It's different from lambrusco on the rocks. Just different ways. It doesn't have to be solely about 30-year-old Bordeaux. And something
more
serious.
light and
but you
fun.
can have
and
fun with wine.
Yeah.
And this is what they do in Italy. So it's a way of life there. It's not meant to be their signature cocktail or anything. It's just that's what they do.
I'm gonna push for Flor to be my by the glass Prosecco now, because I sell this all day at the restaurant.
I think this is really good. You just got to use that stopper. That's
Cool.
the key. So, Cheryl, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
She's giving you a high five. Thank you. And to all of you, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you view into future episodes of Chuck Furuya Uncorked. Until next time, aloha, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.
Aloha.